I do want to ask, Bob Holly wrote in his book, Jim Ross, who was in charge of talent, had been lobbying to bring his buddy Steve in for a long time, but creative didn't know how to do it. Steve had wrestled in Japan for the majority of his career and had a reputation as a genuine badass. So they figured they would introduce him in the Brawl for All. He'd walk through everybody and boom, they'd have a credible guy they could leapfrog over everybody to put up against Austin in the main events. Everybody backstage thought it was a bunch of bullshit. JR was shoving Steve down everyone's throats, saying he was going to destroy everybody. Nobody had a problem with Steve before, but JR was putting him over so often that the boys resented him and hoped he'd get knocked out. So before we talk about the creation of Brawl for All, do you remember there being chatter about Dr. Death and his relationship with JR in the locker room, or is this just sour grapes from Bob Holly?
No, I don't think it's sour grapes. I can't speak for Bob, so I certainly can't read Bob's mind. Bob and I, we're pretty good friends. I assume we still are. I haven't seen Bob in, good Lord, 20 years. I'd love to see him because we work so many matches together. But Doc had this great relationship with JR, and JR did want him to come in. And I don't know how much resentment there was. It's kind of JR's boy, and anytime you have somebody who's somebody's boy that's coming in that's the boss, you kind of hope something happens that doesn't go real well for it just because there's a little bit of nepotism there. With Doc, I don't know if that was the case or not, because Doc was a badass. I mean, Doc was one of the toughest guys that's been in his business history, and he had such an incredible career in Japan. He had such an incredible career for Watts. I mean, Doc was a good guy too. People really like Doc now, but there was a little pushback. Bob is correct. I don't know how much of that's correct. Bob's speaking obviously from his perspective, and I don't know how much of that is correct. As far as there was a lot of pushback because of the association with JR. We did assume he was JR's boy. There's not 100% the case.
I wanted to ask about a story that Vince Russo has told on the Two-Man Power Trip of Wrestling podcast a couple of years ago. He said something like, I remember, bro, it was me, Bradshaw, and I'm almost positive Kevin Kelly was the third person there. And bro, Bradshaw had made this statement with a big smile on his face. He meant it 100%. And he basically said, if this shit were real, I would kick everybody's ass in the locker room. And when he said it, bro, I kind of like snickered because my kind of went through a quick catalog of who all was in that locker room. And I'm kind of saying to myself, bro, that's really easy to say. Anybody could say that. Anybody could make that claim. But backing that up is something that would be totally different. There were the thoughts that ran through my head when Bradshaw made that statement. And I knew JBL wasn't going to miss it, going to win it. I knew Bradshaw. And bro, listen, with all due respect, I'm a New Yorker. Bradshaw's one of those Texas guys. Okay, bro? I'm sorry, bro. But he came across as a big mouth Texan who was full of shit. And bro, as soon as those words came out of his mouth, I knew in my mind, bro, no, you couldn't beat everybody up in the locker room. Bro, no, you're not as tough as the front you're putting on. I did not believe for 1 second. And then, bro, especially when I started seeing Bart knock people out, I'm like, bro, you're not going to beat them. Never, bro. Never did I think he was going to win. So it's almost insinuated create the Brawl for All just with your braggadociousness. And he said, well, fuck it. Let's just do it. Let's find out. Let's see how
it wasn't insinuated. He said he created it for me. And was there really that many bros in that thing?
Yes. I read all the bros.
He says bro that many times.
Roll Tide. Yes, sir.
Oh my God. I told you last week, he hated, he said the Texas thing. He hated that thing. He tried to get me to talk without a Southern accent. Ed Farrar sat down with me, tried to teach me because he thought anybody talked with a Southern accent sounded stupid. And so he didn't want to let me do any promos. We used to go out there on live TV and he'd give us promos. Ron would do one line and then hand me the microphone because Russo didn't want me to talk because he hated Southern accents. I guess he hated JR and Stone Cold too. I have no idea. But there was this bias against the South, because he's a New Yorker. I mean, you can read it in his statement. As far as that being true, that's 100% bullshit. He said that for years. Nobody at that time thought that was true. Talk to Bruce, talk to Bob Holly, talk to Butterbean. No one at that time thought that was true. Now, if it was true, Conrad, first of all, let's address the statement, okay? There's so much that's in this, There's so much that's in this, bro, that we got to talk about, bro. So the statement itself, we had two UFC champions in our dressing room. So there's if I'm saying I can whip the whole world, I don't doubt I said it. We said all kinds of crazy stuff back then. We loved to talk smack. We loved to talk shit in the dressing room. Shamrock sitting right there. There's no way I'm meaning something like that. You got Undertaker, you got Godfather, you got the Harris boys, you got Blackman, you got Bob Holly. We didn't know Bart could knock out the entire world, but we knew Bart was a tough guy. So none of that as far as being real, no, good Lord, no. I think what happened, Conrad, is that, Russo left and went to WCW. And after he left WWE, WWE went through the roof. WCW goes bankrupt, and he spent the next 25 years of his life in. There's nothing else you could say but abysmal failure. I mean, nothing he's touched is still around. Everything he's touched has gone either bankrupt or gone under. He's not welcome back at any place he has been. And so what my thought is that he came up with this idea of the Brawl for All, like he came up with Viagra on a pole match and Judy Bagwell on a pole match and Dave Arquette to be champion. He came up with one of the worst ideas in the history of wrestling. He's done it consistently. And eventually he just said, I'm going to blame it all on Bradshaw. So, I did that just to get Bradshaw. And so that's what I think. Nobody at the time thought that was the case. And I don't think anybody now really thinks that's the case. Russo, he makes Bobby Jaggers look truthful. You can't. The guy can't tell the truth. So no, that to me is 100% preposterous.
It also.
I will tell you this though. I will tell you this. If Russo did this for me, I'd never had a home, and I've told you this before. I'd never owned a home. I'd worked a lot of places, didn't have much money. That Brawl for All, I was in 3 fights. The judges says I won. Whether I did or not, the judges said it. They're my friends. I'm 3 tough guys. Made it to the final, so I made $5,000 a fight. I made $25,000 my losing share of the final match with Bart. So that $40,000 I took down to the bank, and my house was $84,600. So I bought a house, put almost half of it down because of the Brawl for All. It was one of the best things ever happened to me. I had that house for 20 years. When Russo was going bankrupt in these different companies, when I was winning WWE Championship and going to the Hall of Fame, I still had that house. So he got me.
I had no idea you had a little Russo heat on you.
He's this for years. Russo has been trying to make a living off saying stuff about me, and I've never said anything about him. I've never talked about the guy.
No, never have I. Even in mine and your private offline conversations, he's never come up, not one time.
No, so. I don't bring him up. I don't bash him in public. He just says he said this. He goes on the dark side of the ring and makes all this up. It was so bad. Godfather called me and said, "Hey man, you won't believe this. What has Russo got against you?" Godfather never heard any of that. And he called me and told me the whole thing that, Russo had said. He tried to make this whole spiel and make me out to be the bad guy, cover up for his failure. And so I don't know. I guess it's his way of dealing with it.
It is interesting, though, because I kind of view, you say allegedly, if you were saying, oh, I could beat everybody up. That's just the way guys talk. Like guys are just busting balls. Like,
exactly.
I don't know how many of you listening to this understand what I'm saying, but that's just like bar talk, locker room talk, car talk. Just guys are talking shit. I'm the best at everything. We don't really mean it. It's just what we do to bust balls.
I used to say stuff to Shamrock all the time. Don't even try that shooting stuff on me, boy. That ain't gonna work. I know it'd work. He won the UFC when there were no rules.
Yeah,
guys love toughest back. Guys love saying they're the toughest guy in the world. Russo's not one of the guys. He owns some little video store or something, so he's not one of the guys. You can tell by the way he talks, bro.
The idea that you hear that though, and then you take it literally, like, come on, man, he's just kidding around. I do want to ask about Steve Blackman though. Bob Holly wrote in his book when I guess there was a meeting about the rules. He said something like, "So that means if I want to take somebody's knee out with a kick, I can do it, right?" And then they decided, okay, maybe we do need some rules. Here's what Bob wrote. I think they got worried that Steve might kill people. And you know what? He probably could have. There's nobody more dangerous than Steve Blackman, period. He knows every element of the fighting game. He's strong. He's smart. He's lightning quick. He's a well-rounded fighter. Unfortunately for him, and fortunately for the rest of us, Steve hurt himself training against a 300-pound guy who rolled on Steve's leg and blew out his knee. But if that hadn't happened, Steve would have won the whole thing, hands down. What do you make of that note from Bob Holly?
True. 100% true. Yeah, Steve was a badass. And he was training to fight me. That's why he's training against a 300-pound guy. And thank God that he got hurt for me. Because every skill there was, he was better than me. And he was better than me in takedowns. He's better than me in striking. That'd have been a long day for me. And Steve was – and the kick that Bob's talking about, Vince was going to have no rules. And so Steve said, can we leg kick them or take their leg out, kind of a leg sweep? And Vince goes, yeah. And then Steve, thank God he demonstrated it. And it was so freaking violent. We're all like, dude, he's going to break every leg he kicks. It was unbelievable, the violence of that kick. And we're like, you can't allow that. We're guys who've been in bar fights. We're, maybe with Shamrock and Severn you could do that, but not with us. And so Vince like, oh my God, he'll kill somebody. So he started making some rules. But yeah, that story's true. Steve probably, I don't know if Steve would have won it. He probably I say only reason I say he might not would have won it was because Shamrock and Severn were in it to begin with. And those guys were UFC champions. They were trained fighters also. But Steve was by far the best trained fighter in the tournament.